Welcome to Nature Unheard. I'm Emma, and I'm here to bring you stories of resilience, of curiosity, and insights from groundbreaking ideas. Now, have you ever wondered how much a forest is really worth? If fish could talk, what would they say about our rivers? And can AI save biodiversity where humans can't? Join Adonai, Rachael and me along with experts on our journey, from Jordan to Kazakhstan, Kenya to the UK, as we dive deep into the natural world.
Nature Unheard is a podcast
by the EBRD.
So Rachael, be honest with me, this is a safe space. How very London was your journey here today?
It was extremely London. 2 trains, 1 apology from a stranger when I got in their way.
Yeah, typical.
And the closest I got to eye contact with anyone was a mouse I saw on the platform.
You sure it wasn't a rat?
Definitely a mouse, much smaller, much cuter.
Okay, nice. So for once, I actually had the opposite, not to flex, but I had a perfectly on-time train, even if I did have to run the last section, which is uphill, to make it. I even managed to get a seat.
Oh, victory.
Yeah, which probably means severe delays are waiting for me later.
Or that the city is briefly being kind to you.
We can cross our fingers and hope.
But it's funny, isn't it, how cities have moods. They shape how we move, how we feel, and even how we talk to and interact with each other.
Yeah, I defo agree with the mood thing. I think for me, because I grew up in a village, although I'm mostly used to cities now, I do find them noisy, busy, dirty, and somehow many people, us included, end up flocking to them to live.
And not just people, a lot of animals as well. So on this episode of Nature Unheard, we're looking a little more closely at the natural world, even when it's hidden behind concrete, traffic, and very persistent pigeons.
Yuck, I hate pigeons.
Yeah, urban pigeons are facing a lot of challenges, some of the same ones we are in cities. Cities are where some of the biggest problems we face relating to climate collide. There's flooding, heat, pollution, disappearing green spaces. But cities are also where nature-based solutions can do something more for us and for animals.
Okay, you're going to have to explain this to me as if I have the IQ of a pigeon, which in actual fact isn't that far off. When you say nature-based solutions, what do you actually mean?
So a nature-based solution, or NBS, as we'll probably throw that acronym around quite a lot, is using nature to fix very unglamorous, often urban problems.
Okay.
So instead of just putting down more concrete and pipes, you let rivers do what rivers do. You can add trees to cool streets. You can bring back nature to soak up water and reduce risk. For example, I was just on the London Urban Climate Walk, and they showed us Finsbury Square, which looks like a very unremarkable, somewhat muddy in winter field. But then they explain that this is actually the green roof of a parking garage below it, and it soaks up water and manages local flooding, and also in summer keeps the area cooler than it would be otherwise.
Okay, so in an ideal world, fewer grey fixes and more green ones, just like Finsbury Square.
Exactly. And that brings us to our last episode of the season.
No!
It's
Did
time.
you hear that vibrato as well on that? No! The emotion, it's bringing it out of me.
But we've explored rivers and forests, the depths of the ocean, and even space. So I can't think of a better way to wrap things up than to bring it back home and see how nature and urban life can finally get along.
What on earth am I going to do without Nature Unheard?
Don't worry. Rumor has it there's a season 2 in the pipeline.
Thank goodness.
But going back to nature-based solutions, we have a soundbite from one of our colleagues who's in Chișinău, Moldova, where the main river, River Bîc, was for a long time a source of problems, especially when it rained. This is the first large-scale NBS project at EBRD. Rodrigo's been walking along the river and discovering what happens when a city starts working with nature again.
Come on then, Rodrigo, take it away for us.
I'm in Chișinău, walking along the Bîc, and it's so cold right now. Everything around me is frosted. So people keep telling me stories about how wrong things used to go with this river. Like, when it rained, this place completely flooded, And what's wild is that the river is actually tiny in some parts, yet it caused so much damage. So now, the EBRD and its partners are working with the river instead of against it, by giving it space to slow the water down, absorb floods, and protect the city.
That's quite cool. I think I get it now. It's not just about fixing a river. It's about how cities think about nature in the first place. Not as decoration, but as something that actually makes it work.
And that's a perfect moment to bring in our next guest, Ingrid Coetzee, who leads work on nature-based solutions and urban resilience at ICLEI.
What is ICLEI?
It is a very long acronym. It originally stood for the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives.
Right.
So you see why they now go by ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. And she's helping cities embed nature, its benefits, and nature-based solutions into everyday urban planning and decision-making.
Okay, well, hopefully the conversation is a little bit simpler for me than that acronym. I'm looking forward to hearing about what countries she's been working in.
Welcome, Ingrid. It's good to have you on the podcast today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What got you interested in nature and cities? Where did they first collide in your life? And you thought, I need to figure this out.
I don't think it was so much of a collision. It's been more of a gradual awareness. I live and grew up in one of the most beautiful parts of the world, in the Western Cape. I live in Cape Town, which is surrounded by mountains and seas. Nature has always been important for me. Mountains and forests are my safe space. And as a student, I did some research on how local geographies, the physical environment, culture, socioeconomic systems shape cities and streetscapes. And that sort of led me into a profession where I was working in government for most of my life. But I've worked also in cities, and I'm now with ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. And I think it's just living in a city where nature is such a fundamental part of how we do things, how the city was planned. I wake up in the mornings and from my bedroom window, I look on to Table Mountain, the back of Table Mountain. The other day I was sitting on my balcony and there was a black sparrowhawk that flew across and it was chased by a whole lot of starlings, obviously not very happy about the sparrowhawk. So yeah, it's just always been part of my life and how I do things and my value systems.
So it sounds like Cape Town is doing some things right. Can you tell us about a city that's surprised you in a good way, that's doing something differently that other cities could learn from and maybe steal?
One that comes to mind is Del Carmen in the Siargao Islands in the Philippines. It used to be known as the illegal mangrove cutting capital, and it's now host to one of the largest contiguous mangrove forests, which was declared a wetland of international importance under the Ramsar Convention in 2024. And what happened there was it was the vision of the mayor who started already in 2011 working with communities to, first of all, stop the illegal cutting of mangroves and then to start protecting them. And the interesting thing is that as a result of those interventions, when they had that super typhoon Odette in 21, the mangroves that had been restored actually, although the impact was horrendous, and there were lots of losses and things, the mangroves actually helped reduce the impacts of those typhoons. And then in a very different part of the world, I think another city that has impressed me is in Malmö. It's the southern part of Sweden. And they've been a leader for sustainable urban development for many years. And they have this neighborhood called Augustenborg, which was a very early eco-city development. And that also, interestingly, came as a result of a 100-year flood in 2014. That was the driving force for introducing this eco-city neighborhood notion and working also with local communities to design the solutions. Residents starting a carpool. One of them designed the open stormwater management system, which is still in place today. So, yeah, there are really, really good things. And I think if there's one lesson out of both of those examples, it's, having the vision at the political level, but specifically understanding the importance of nature and working very closely with the local citizens in coming up with the solutions.
Yeah, it sounds like nature has a lot of benefits for the local residents. Earlier in the episode, I was discussing with Emma, our co-presenter, about some of the residents in London, the pigeons in particular. But many cities all over the world have not just resident birds, but migratory birds too, which is really cool to think about. What can cities do to help be a safe stopover point for these migratory birds on their long journeys?
Well, I'm glad you raised this, because cities really are very important stopover points, but on the one hand. But on the other hand, there's a lot that happens in a city that is often really detrimental to these birds. So ICLEI has started an initiative called Journeys for Life, which cities can join for free. And we work together with the various migratory route flyways and the partnerships, but also the conventional migratory species. And it's about helping cities raise awareness for themselves, but their citizens, and also how they plan their cities, and really empowering communities to take action in protecting these species. So one example I want to give you is from Tata in Hungary, which is not a very big city. It has a population of about just over 23,000 people. It's 70 km out of Budapest. It's located on a Ramsar wetland site, and they have every year in the sort of late autumn, early winter, tens of thousands of wild geese come. They predominantly from Siberia and Scandinavia, and they come to this lake. What this city has done, and they've been doing it now for almost 2 decades, is they celebrate the arrival of these geese with a wild goose festival. And that involves everybody from grandma to the little tiny tots, birders. I mean, obviously birders from around the world will come, but it's very much embedded as part of the culture in the city. So I think that's a really great example. I was very privileged to participate this in at the end of year last year. And, it's so besides having the glühwein and some chimney cake, everybody's out there from very early in the morning to watch the geese come in and leave the lake. And you hang around till late in the evening, and it's freezing cold. But there's such a spirit, around this amazing experience. I mean, it just gives you sort of goose flesh when you see those geese. So really great examples of what can be done very simply and easily.
I love that. I have never thought I'd want to go to a goose party before, but that just sounds fabulous. And
it's the best.
I can see how that gets everybody really excited. It's a beautiful, large-scale thing. It's a connection with the seasons. But I'll stop picking on pigeons, I promise. But what they do when these nature features attract some of the animals we don't find quite so exciting to look at. The pigeons, the rats, even, the foxes. I love the foxes, but they love my food waste bin too much.
Yeah. So there's a lot of examples of sort of these conflicts between people and wildlife. Pigeons are amongst the least. You get really big problems with some of the other bird species. And in Texas, the Audubon Society has got a very interesting program where they have these rookeries where birds obviously come and nest. And they can be really noisy. I know we have what we call the ibis, the sacred ibis, or the hardidars, and they are very noisy, and their sort of poop is very smelly and it's messy. But what the guys in Texas have done is they basically create artificial nesting structures. So they decoy the birds from the sites where they would normally, whether it's in a garden or a public area or close to a school or creche or something, or far away from airports. And they've been very successful in creating these new rookery environments because birds need some place to stay, And so that's been a very positive way of doing it. In my own city, I talked about the sea just now. So South Africans love outdoor, and sort of surfing and swimming in the sea is a very important part of our life. But we have sharks, and there are huge problems with shark attacks, or it also affects things like the fishing industry, etc. So we started what we call a shark spotters program. So they would set up these little huts on strategic points high up. They trained people that had previously been unemployed from indigent communities, and they're called shark spotters. And it's all along the Cape Peninsula. It's not just in Cape Town. And they really, they've been trained. They've got special sunglasses and binocs, and they watch for sharks. And there's this whole system of flags going up and down, and they work with the lifeguards. And it's very, very effective. It has brought down incidents of shark attacks. In the past, people were very dependent on shark nets, but there's a lot of controversy around how good those shark nets are. And this shark spotters program has proved to be far more effective. And it's also a great way of involving the community in handling these conflicts between animal and humans.
It sounds like a solution that really works for everyone involved in the landscape, the peoples, the animal. That's really nice to hear. Thinking again about what we work with nature and how nature works for us, and bringing it back to the city streets. How do you help cities adopt nature-based solutions at a bigger scale across whole neighborhoods?
Well, we've done a number of things. We've had training programs. We have done advocacy around this. It's engagement with the cities on a one-on-one basis. And we've had some very successful projects. One of the projects I want to talk a little bit about is the Generation Restoration Cities project, which is part of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. It's a UNEP-led project, but we worked with them because we felt that a lot of the work on nature-based solutions under the decade was very sort of national focused, and yet cities are such an important part and can make such a big contribution to restoring ecosystems. So we worked in 25 cities around the world in different types of biomes, and it was about two main sort of thrusts. So one is advocating for public and private investment into ecosystem restoration and through nature-based solutions. And the other one was more around empowering the local governments, the private sector, communities to replicate and upscale. And if I can just give you two quick examples to show the impact of this. The one is also from my area. It's a town called Overstrand. So it's a secondary city, but it's located in the Kogelberg Biosphere Reserve, which is part of the Cape Floral Kingdom protected. It's a World Heritage Site. And they have big problems around water management, the destruction of a very important peatland to safeguard these water resources, erosion. It impacts also the small-scale fishing industry. This was one of the projects that was included in this Generation Restoration Cities project, and really about applying a integrated watershed management approach. So it's almost, from source to sea, or from the catchment down to the coast. And then the other one is in India, in Kochi in Kerala province, also a coastal city, and they have these backwaters. And as a result of urban development, but as agriculture too, the original canals have become very polluted. Many of them have been canalized. So the sort of indigenous ecosystem services are not able to function anymore. And it's affecting the water subsidence into the freshwater systems as well. And what we did there was to start a project on canal restoration to improve the water quality of the Vembanad Lakes ecosystem. Again, not just for the city, but the greater basin as well. And that was also an interesting one because a lot of it had to do with awareness, teaching the young children and industries and households not to dump their waste into the canals, which was what happened, and developing a restoration plan. So two similar cities, but very different challenges, very different parts of the world, and really, great success through these projects that we've been able to implement.
It's interesting to hear that the behavioral change element is a really important part of this nature effort in cities. We heard a little bit earlier about one of EBRD's projects in Moldova and the River Bîc and restoration there. Mm-hmm. But we also have a lot of smaller scale interventions in schools or hospitals, building in sustainable drainage solutions and smaller localized nature-based solutions. Are those efforts and things people can do in their households or their back gardens meaningful? Is action at that level of scale, of individual behavior, of individual household efforts, contributing to the wider nature resilience services of the city?
I think so, absolutely. I mean, the Coetzee example was one. They started things like butterfly gardens and all kinds of other things. Individuals can do a lot. And it's actually very simple and affordable actions that we can take in our homes or our schools or our businesses. So, for example, one very obvious thing, and I think very important, is about minimizing soil sealing. So let's take up all the paving in the gardens, because this makes the surfaces be more permeable. And if you're in an area that's water scarce, it helps the water, when we do have rain, to replenish groundwater, which it can't do if there's paving everywhere. And that in turn helps reduce flood risks. The other thing that one can do at a sort of an individual level is to, in your garden or the community park, is to plant native species that will attract birds and insects. Now, to give you the impact of what that can do is we have an area here, it's an under-resourced neighborhood in Cape Town called Vrygrond. And they started a few years ago with a peace garden. It's a community organization initiative around nature, nurture, and nutrition. So they've got all kinds of interventions. It's also around mental health, nutrition, etc. One of the things that they started realizing about a year and a half in was that suddenly they were finding the Cape dwarf chameleons in this garden. Now, the Cape dwarf chameleon is a near-threatened species, and it's very, very rare, and you don't see them. But there, as a result of this garden that they had created in the community, these chameleons were coming back. And today, they sight up to 20 chameleons in a single day. And that has had an impact on things like sunbirds and sugarbirds. And it's really been a very important part of that community, sense of community for the people living there. They're so proud of their chameleons. So, that's just one small example. There's other things like composting your domestic waste from the kitchen, not using pesticides. I must tell you, that's a little bit hard for me when I see the creepy crawlies eating my beautiful flowers. But yeah, let's not use pesticides. Rain gardens to help manage, stormwater. So there's a lot that one can do, and it doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. And I think the successes are, and they're very often quite quick, the returns on those initiatives.
I'm, in my own little way, very hopeful to someday find a hedgehog in our garden. It's a small space, but it backs onto a bigger industrial site, not necessarily the most beautiful space. But we got a hole in the fence. Maybe someone will come through at some point, and I'd be absolutely thrilled with that level of nature in my garden.
Absolutely. One of the things I did when we had this water scarcity in Cape Town was I stopped using my pool. So I use it now as a dam. So when it rains in the winter, I get water in. It's no longer filtered and chlorinated or whatever. And in summer, I use that water in my garden. But you know what I discovered this year? I have frogs in my pool. These little, they're tiny little, minute little frogs. So that, those are the sorts of things that start happening.
Another little safe stopping point for those frogs on their life cycle.
Yeah.
So can we talk money and momentum? How are we financing these projects? Which sort of finance blends and structures are actually getting them to happen? Is it development banks like the EBRD? Is it the city and municipal bonds and capital markets? Philanthropy, creative things? You mentioned some community initiatives. How are these all getting paid for?
Yeah, I mean, the finance thing is a big topic. Hey, we're seeing increasingly that resources are becoming more stretched, and there's a lot of competition. Cities have to provide health services, all kinds of other things, waste management, transportation, etc. And the one that always draws the short straw is nature and biodiversity. So I think there's a couple of things that are happening. One of it is how you package and how you message why nature and biodiversity and restoring ecosystems is important. It's not just because we want to have nice green spaces. It has a whole lot of other co-benefits as well. The other thing is realizing that the funding envelope cannot just be the purview of the municipality, because where does the municipality get its money from? It's from the taxpayer. So we are seeing, that blended finance models are becoming more attractive, and they are increasingly being used and applied. Development banks are really important in this whole picture. And so you have this basket of things. So the Overstrand example that I mentioned to you just now has been a great success story there. They got a little bit of catalytic funding through the Generation Restoration Cities project. And what the municipality did there was they used that to attract investment from other sources. And they applied a basket approach. So they went to the private sector, local businesses investing in nurseries for community-based enterprises. That's one example. They're looking into PPPs. Suddenly, funding came in from philanthropies. And they've even now gone into the whole sort of blue carbon credit market, and they've managed to secure an investment from an organization that supports, these blue carbon credits. So yeah, I think that those options are out there. It's the tricky thing is how you package it and getting the expertise in the municipalities to be able to do this, because it's taking the municipality into a whole new area that's not necessarily their comfort zone or where they have expertise in.
Can you paint us a picture, please? If we get it right, cities and nature, how will the city's mood change? What will people feel like in their day-to-day life, on the commute, in their energy bills, during heat waves, during storms?
So what I hope to see, and what I'm convinced that people will feel in their daily life, is that they will feel happier because we live in cities that are more livable, where we can smell the flowers instead of diesel fumes. We can see the blue skies instead of this gray pollution haze. And we can hear the birds or the clicking frogs instead of the traffic. And if we're on the commute from school to home or home to work, that we can be more relaxed in the sense that, the transport modes that we are using are quieter and cleaner, or the fact that we've got more options for cycling, bicycle lanes, or walking. As far as energy bills are concerned, I think most homeowners would feel comfort in the knowledge that it's a cleaner source of energy, particularly if that energy source can become cheaper. As far as heat waves are concerned, I'm hoping that, if we have more trees, that we'll feel the cooler shade of those trees. And after rain, if I think of the examples of Valencia or Del Carmen that we talked about earlier, grateful that because we're looking after our wetlands and our natural sponges, and we don't have paving everywhere so that we can replenish the groundwater, that we'll be grateful that our properties have not been destroyed, our livelihoods are still there, and we haven't had so much loss of life, and we're catching the water in the groundwater and our sponges.
From small impacts to the really, really big ones. It sounds like a lot of things worth working for. So let's end with a myth bust. What's one misconception we should just retire this year about nature in cities? Is it the pigeons? Are they not as bad as we think?
Yeah, but I think it's bigger than that. I think the big myth bust is that nature and cities they can exist together. And in fact, nature is not anti-development. Nature positive urban development is the new development, and it's actually good for business. We've seen there's some incredible figures. The World Economic Forum has come out some years ago with this point that 50% of global GDP is dependent to some extent, on nature. And people don't think about it that way. And if we remember that 80% of global GDP is generated, up to 80% is generated in cities, I think it's a really important myth buster when we look at cities and how cities are growing. And then it also reminds me that it's so important to bust this myth about this antithesis and between cities or development and nature, and the role of nature in our lives is what Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in December 2020. And we'll remember that was the sort of COVID time, etc. And he was saying that when he was speaking on the state of the planet at Columbia University, he was saying that we have to make peace with nature, and that must be the defining task of this 21st century, because we cannot continue with this, as he called it, humanity's war on the planet. And I think that message is still very much topical and important, particularly now in these changing, sort of times where we have, from a geopolitics perspective and from an economic perspective, things have become very uncertain and they have changed a lot. So I would like to see that myth is bust once and for all.
Yeah, we shouldn't be in conflict with nature. We are nature.
Yeah, precisely.
Well, this, I think, wraps our last episode of the season. Thank you so much, Ingrid, for being with us and for ending on such a strong and positive note for this episode and for the podcast.
Thank you so much, Rachael. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, I think it's an amazing podcast series.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Nature Unheard, where we dive into the big questions shaping our planet's future. Don't forget to follow the podcast wherever you listen so that you don't miss an episode. And if you can't get enough of us, we're at EBRD_official on Instagram or at EBRD on X and Blue Sky. This podcast was made possible thanks to our EBRD donors. It was produced by Olga Aristedo and Cecilia Calatrava from EBRD, with production support from Bespoken Media. Till next time, bye! The rehabilitation of the Bîc River in Chișinău, Moldova, was supported by the Green Climate Fund, one of the EBRD's key donors. This project is a strong example of the EBRD Green Cities programme in action, helping cities become more sustainable and resilient.